A recent survey found that nearly 1/3 of children cannot use books correctly when starting school and try to swipe them like smartphones. Let's get into it.
They actually created machines that use reinforcement technology to optimize the grip of reinforcement technology.
TikTok or YouTube Shorts, it's just such degrading trash.
There's a race to the bottom online that's probably a consequence of something like algorithmic competition for grip of short-term attention, and that's completely tantamount to addiction.
Under no circumstances should 12, 13, 14-year-old kids be doing this.
But then there's also the problem of what children aren't doing while they're absorbed in their screens.
My overall message is once you understand what's going on in these online worlds, especially social media, they're just not for children.
Too much supervision in the real world and no supervision at all in the online world.
You know, if our minds are like an LLM, what are you putting in? Are you putting in movies and books and good television? Or are you putting in little 10-second clips of people getting kicked in the balls?
My name is Casey, and I have been a husband, father, and yes, even a marriage and family therapist, which means that I have seen kids going all the way down to 10, 11 years old for the last several years. And I know for darn sure that the IQ tests, the inability to use books correctly, and the problems with other cognitive social skills have definitely correlated with the onset of screen time. If you would like to get behind a future where our children can thrive and even use technology wisely so that they don't become impotent adults, please like on the way in. Let's get into what Sky News found and why it should alarm every parent out there. Just as a preemptive strike, I would say my oldest of my 4 kids is 9 years old and my youngest is 1 year old. And I would say without a doubt that we made some mistakes with our older children that we would not make with our younger kids in terms of their technology use and the ways that it is really just the easier, softer way to get them to be distracted by utilizing screens. And so no shade on anyone when you need to utilize technology or when you feel compelled to do that. I wouldn't criticize you for that necessarily, but I do think that the numbers are pretty stark when it comes to the onset of technology use in the front-facing camera phone and other simpler screens like iPads, and the declines in intelligence, cognitive abilities, their ability to read, and other social skills.
The effect of the technology per se in the fragmentation of attention. The second is the content of the online world, pornography perhaps, and this online reputation savaging being foremost among them. But then there's also the problem of what children aren't doing while they're absorbed in their screens. So walk us through that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So we are mammals, and mammals have large brains comparatively, especially social mammals like dogs and dolphins and chimpanzees and humans. And all mammals play when they're young. Mammalianism is a long childhood. We literally drink milk from the skin of our mother's chest. So we have a long childhood. And what has to happen is the child starts off fully attached to the mother for sustenance. And as they get better motor behavior, they move further and further away from the mother to play. And play involves risky things. It involves learning to jump, to climb trees, if that's what your species does. Many or most mammals play chasing games, predator-prey, tag, sharks and minnows. So we have to do this. We have to engage with the physical and social world over and over again, tens of thousands of times, in a low-stakes environment where I practice running away from a shark, and if the shark gets me, we just laugh and then we do it again.
Let's read a little bit from Sky News, but I would say also for any parents that actually need resources, the book's The Anxious Generation is foundational in terms of how to address children and technology use. So if you have any questions, see Jonathan Haidt, spelled Haidt, and The Anxious Generation for what kind of relationship your children might benefit from in use of technology and how that could be deferred to 16 years old or older by creating cohorts of other parents who might be able to do it with you so your kid doesn't get real strong FOMO and doesn't hate you forever for not allowing them the same type of Snapchat nonsense that their friends have. Reading from Sky News, it says, in an annual survey of primary school students by early years charity Kindred Squared, this is in the UK, Teachers estimated 26% of their children in reception class, that would be kindergarten, I guess, for us, this year were having frequent toilet mishaps, rising to more than 1/3 in certain parts of the UK. Staff also report around 28% of children started school unable to eat and drink independently. Over half of staff said that children's parents' excessive screen time was a key factor in children not being ready for school.
Put on a long movie about characters in a moral universe. So there's issues of good and bad and norms and betrayal, and it's part of their moral training, their moral formation, and they're watching it with another person. Now that can be you, ideally, but it's okay if it's a sibling or a friend because it's social. Here's what's really, really bad: iPad time by yourself. Because that's exactly the opposite. It's solitary, it's not stories, and if they are stories, there are 15-second stories that are amoral. Other thing that I really want parents to understand is that this is not like TV. TV is a good way of entertainment, but a touch screen is a behaviorist training device.
The UK's target was to have 75% of children be school ready by the year 2028, and in the latest Department of Education figures in their country say that 68.3% were judged to have a good level of development, a slight increase over the previous year. But the survey of 1,000 parents of 4 and 5-year-olds, 88% said their child was ready to start school, and more than 1/3 said their child was more ready than most children. So parents are having a disproportionately optimistic view of what their kids' capabilities are. And while I can totally understand this, I too see my children as being much more competent because you see them in their small moments, you see them when they're most available cognitively, and school might not always present those circumstances. So maybe we should be asking the schools, what are you doing perhaps that is preventing these kids from looking more like they look at home when they're at school? Because setting young boys in a classroom and expecting them to sit still without throwing spitwads or having tests of competence within the hierarchy is probably a naive way to treat boys and to say that you're getting the best out of them. Nearly all parents said that they would like to see national guidance in making their child school ready. The government has been focusing on investment in early education. Frankly, I don't really want the government to educate my children any earlier. We go to a private school that is partial homeschool and partial in-school. And it is absolutely a no government funding school. Out of 2020 and beyond, it was clear that the government may not only be incompetent, but also may not have the best interests of our children in mind, as the teachers' unions began to decline from returning to in-classroom work because they were either afraid of getting sick or naively, maybe that was the naive view, probably realistically, they just didn't want to return, but they did want to get paid. And so this government having more access over a longer period of time to my children or to your children may actually inhibit their growth. And so while they would like to see early childhood readiness increase, perhaps I would like to see the government be taken out of education, and let's see if whether private enterprise or just simply homeschooling could be better for our kids.
So devastating. Puberty is this really important period of child development in which the brain is rewiring based on input it's getting. And all around the world, adult societies help their kids through that transition. How does a boy become a man? How does a girl become a woman? What we did in the early 2010s is we said, how about if we don't help you with that at all? How about if we give you a device which will take up all of your attention, like everything that isn't nailed down to something, it's going to go to your phone. And a lot of that attention is going to be to random weirdos on the internet who are selected by an algorithm because of how extreme their performance is, as voted by other random weirdos on the internet. How about if we let that socialize you?
Here's the part that should alarm us even more. Across multiple countries, intelligence testing scores have been plateaued or declined for the first time in generations. So generation after generation, test scores, IQ scores were continually rising, and now for the first time in measured history, they have gone down. It's not because children's genetics all of a sudden got worse, although you might be able to blame some of that. And it's not because teachers all of a sudden got worse, although that might be part of it too. It is because cognitive environments changed. children are learning or being distracted, at least, by screens in great abundance in comparison to what they were previously. And obviously, in my generation, being a millennial, or if you're Gen X or older, you didn't have screens at all growing up, or the time was extremely limited, and it was still used as a tool, not an entertainment device, other than TV, obviously. So, tool is probably the right way to use technology in school. But when we move into it being entertainment, that's when we begin to have a stimulus-rich environment, which leads to distractibility and other problems that might present as ADHD, when in reality, we're just giving far too many distractions, and then we're expecting our children to be able to overcome that with lower impulse control than what an adult would have. This is the part that's going to be a challenge for parents, and I would be preaching to the choir and to myself in this as well. Modern tech rewards rapid stimulus switching. So think about reels, shorts, other things like that that are frequently cycling. It short circuits frustration tolerance. So when you can simply swipe away from whatever the stimulus is, you don't learn to tolerate discomfort, and that discomfort might actually include boredom. Being able to tolerate boredom is a skill that children learn when they're compelled to, but if they don't ever have to be bored, they certainly will not have tolerance for environments that they find uncomfortable. It reduces deep attention, of course, to have devices in your face all day, and it trains the brain for reaction, not reflection. Here's the way that we can refute that. Books. Obviously, reading to our children, and the shocking part of this study is that a third of children came in to school not even knowing how to turn a page. I think it was between 28 and 33%. If your child does not know how to turn the page on a book, then we have failed largely in reading enough to our children, in being able to take time to demonstrate to them that reading is important, and having not read in front of them ourselves. So even though it might not be a behavior that you're doing with them as quality time with them, if they don't ever see you read a book, we have largely failed in preparing them. And when you're reading, obviously, you learn to tolerate boredom a little bit. There's more discomfort in that you can have to think more clearly about and logically and use your imagination. It obviously creates embedded patience in the child, and it requires mental effort without that instant reward. I'm reading an extremely short book right now called The Mortification of Sin by a Puritan named John Owen, and it's about 200 pages, I think, and I really want to get to the end of it so that I can share some of the insights that I've learned in it here. And it's taking me, because I read before I go to sleep, it's taking me way longer than it should, and even I feel that stress tolerance building in me because I want to be done simply so I can share what I've learned. So that begins to be embedded in children. They get patience, they get tolerance, they have to use their imagination, and when a developing brain spends thousands of hours on devices designed to capture attention, we shouldn't be shocked when their attention to everything else weakens. I obviously see this clinically, as children will come into my practices with parents who say that they can't focus, they're not able to maintain good attention to what they're doing, they're not getting grades that they think they should, and that they melt down or they have frequent tantrums when they're not hyperstimulated. And so I don't shame them, because parenting is hard, and especially now we're in an extremely challenging environment, because I do think there's more stress. And then when you add, even though I know we live in a post-war consensus that has been extremely comfortable for a long time, there are additional stressors and there are additional pressures on parents, especially because we know the reality of what's going on in the world around us, more so than we ever have. So children get some of that cast down to them as their parent is more stressed, and we should not be shocked when they're in a dopaminergic rich environment. Phones and other stimulus like screens will slowly drip their dopamine forth, and that's why you have to swipe again or click again or refresh in order to get more dopamine and more stimulus, and therefore we shouldn't be shocked when they're incapable of not swiping away from real life and not paying attention to what's actually worth their attention. Listen, I'm a dad. I'm a father of 4. I don't live in the 1800s, but I did move my family to a homestead and a little plot so that we could attempt to grow our own food, raise chickens, have animals, plant things in the ground and have them nurture them and work them up so that we can eat them. Those are all activities that we have adapted to get neurochemical rewards for thousands of years. And now we are simply getting and draining those neurochemical rewards in instantaneous ways. And I don't begrudge anyone for what they need to do with technology, but we need to limit screens intentionally. If you don't believe that ADHD is the natural outgrowth of the environment that we're putting our children in now, you're out of your mind, because it is simply there. All of us have a proneness to lacking attention, and now there are far too many stimulus, and they're far too stimulating for our children not to have ADHD unless we are intentional about it. Now, that doesn't mean that anyone who has ADHD is lying to themselves or anything like that. It does just mean that, according even to Gabor Mate, we have a proneness to ADHD, and it is oftentimes unlocked by environmental circumstances. That is the one part of his book that I took as being gospel. Many average school-age children were spending up to 6 hours on screens a day, and that was in their personal time and their time outside of the school. Now, if you must use technology as a tool while you're in school, you probably should even consider more limitations when the child is at home. Screens before attention is built in, embedded in the child's cognitive ability, are extremely dangerous. Screens replacing reading, absolutely a no-go at this point. Screens, raising kids, we all have seen the results. And the results are in when you see that child in public and you know they're either holding a screen or they're holding a tantrum, you know why. Books build minds, tech consumes them if they're unmanaged. Today, kids are not okay, and it is probably mostly because we parents have deferred a lot of their time and attention onto screens instead of onto books or real IRL things like raising chickens, being outside, playing with each other, and even jumping out of trees. So here's the way to tighten it up. Read to your kids. Let them be bored. Put real books in their hands and their minds, and delay personal devices as long as you can. An unlocked iPhone is commensurate to just giving them a pack of smokes and telling them to go for it. In the future, we will absolutely abhor the fact that we gave our children devices, especially unlocked internet-ready devices, and then expected that they would come out better than we did. If you would like to continue to try to build a future of faith, fatherhood, and freedom in America, and part of that is limiting these devices and being wise about our technology use, please like, share, and subscribe. I would love to earn your support. Thank you so much.